Hello, friends. Welcome back to Coaches Exploring the Seven Habits of Highly Effective People from a Principles Behind Clarity perspective. And today we're going to be reviewing Habit 1, Be Proactive. And Lynn, maybe you can just talk about what you were just referring to, the way he starts off this section.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I just read it again, actually.
Yeah, go
Yeah.
for it.
Um, so he says, as you read the book, try to stand apart from yourself. Try to project your consciousness upward into a corner of the room and see yourself in your mind's eye reading. Can you look at yourself almost as though you were someone else? And then he says, think about the mood you are now in. Can you identify it? What are you feeling? How would you describe your present mental state? So as I was reading this earlier, and we were about to come on today and do
Mm,
this review, I looked because, of course, I've read it before, but I realised that I'm doing a little review here, and there's loads and loads more pages. So I actually got a bit up in my head, like, oh, I need to, maybe I've missed things. Maybe I want to say something else. Maybe. So when he says this, how would you describe your present mental state? And I'm laughing at myself, going, really?
mm,
I was getting myself in a tizz because maybe I've missed something. Maybe I won't know what to say. I loved that he brought. It was like he just brings you very much into the moment.
mm,
He just absolutely brings you very much into the moment.
mm. And a little further down, he says, "We are not our feelings. We are not our moods.
Mm,
We are not even our thoughts." And I thought, if I read that in The Missing Link, if I read that in Clarity, if I read that in any Three Principles book, I wouldn't be surprised. It would fit. um, so again, that was just something that I thought, wow, that again, like something that's very aligned with the principles behind Clarity. And I know, it's. I think of that Sid Banks line of, well, the thing that preceded his enlightenment experience of him telling somebody at a conference that he was very insecure, and the guy kind of offhandedly just said, "Oh, you're not insecure. You just think you are."
just thinking.
But it's like, again, like if people really understood and um, believed that they were not their feelings, they were not their moods, they were not even their thoughts, what a difference knowing those three things could make for the world.
Yeah. And just slightly below that bit, Greg, as well, I underlined all of that paragraph. And it says it affects not only our attitudes and behaviors, but also how we see other people. It becomes our map of the basic nature of mankind. And it's not quite that, but it came to mind that it's in some way a map that would point to, let's say, the with a capital T, the human experience, which is, I guess, what most people are sort of seeking to work out,
Mm.
what it's all about. And parallel to the idea of, Jamie Smart's idea of a misunderstanding, that we're
Mm.
clouded, let's say, because of a basic misunderstanding. So perhaps, we've taken the map out on a rainy day kind of thing, rather than taking it out on a sunny day and all the inks got kind of, run together.
Runny, yeah.
Map's got cloudy. Yes.
I like the way he's pointed out in this the social mirror part, the three different types of
Mm.
maps. The genetic determinism says your grandparents did it to you. The psychic determinism says your parents did it to you, and the environmental determinism that says your boss is doing it to you. And I just, when I read through that now, I just laugh because I'm like, oh yeah, I've been there. I've thought all those things. Oh, I'm a picky eater because of uh, my upbringing. My grandmother did it to me, and my stubborn father did it to me, and I had to quit my job because of my boss did it to me. All those kinds of things. Um, anyway, it's very enlightening to see all that.
Yeah, that even, your grandparents had short tempers and it's your DNA, it just goes through the generations and you inherited it. In addition, you're Irish, and that's the nature of Irish people. That made me laugh. Thinking of you, that made me laugh. So, but no, it's sort of coming from, even was it Darwin that brought up the nature nurture question?
Mm-hmm.
Is it really because of your genetic constitution, or has it just got to do with, well, of course, your parents were born and bred there, you were born and bred there, everybody else is born. The language that you used in your little farmhouse community is always going to be that. So, and of course you're going to end up with some strange infection from the animals that you've been dealing with all your life in the farmhouse. But it's not genetics kind of thing, therefore it can be changed.
Yeah
Well,
this is to me the whole the I don't know if it's the promise of it or the inspiration of it to rise above all those things, and then this is where Covey refers to Viktor Frankl in his story in the Nazi concentration camps, and really painting a picture. I know when I first read this, immediately after finishing this book, the next book I picked up was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, because this story was so inspiring. But it just makes you realize, like, compared to what Frankl went through, my life's pretty good. Even though I often find myself in a reactive place of blaming and all those kinds of things. So just the ability for us to rise above our conditioning. And from a principles perspective, like realizing, like, oh yeah, I am creating my reality. Like the perceptual reality that I'm living in is being created from within me.
What I also took from this, there's so much outside in stuff here in these pages, and then the Frankl story, which I heard and read the other book also, is that and from a principle, so to align this with the principles perspective, the notion that and Frankl's realization that he could not be harmed at a core level, he could not be harmed. When it gets to the point where he's like, what more are they going to take from me? Oh, they can't. They realize they couldn't take him. They actually couldn't take him. So that notion of we cannot be harmed, despite sometimes our thinking that we can, or other people are doing something. Or I think for me that was that seemed pretty clear. I also love this under the proactive model. Proactive people can carry their own weather with them. And when we talk about our thoughts being like the weather and shifting and all of that kind of the fact that we could be bitching and moaning about the rain, but we're not going to switch it off. So and neither can we switch off the thoughts. We just have to let them move on.
Yeah, it's funny when that idea of weather comes up. It's like I think, how often do I turn on the TV to go to the Weather Network, or we have a channel here called CP24 that's like a news station that has the weather up in the corner. It's like, it's the end of the evening or whatever, and my wife and I are like, oh, what's the weather going to be like tomorrow? And you turn on, you see like rain, you're like, oh, it's going to be a shitty day tomorrow. It's like, well,
yeah,
we're already, like, it hasn't even rained a drop of water yet, and we're already setting ourselves up to have a bad day because of some icon that showed up on the weather channel there. Anyway, it's so interesting.
Yeah, so amazing.
I highlighted this thing about that's in line with what you were just talking about Frankl's realization of who he really was. But in the words of Gandhi, they cannot take away our self-respect if we do not give it to them. And all of that in the same. And it's amazing when you think back at like these characters from history, Frankl or Gandhi. when I got into the principles, and I've heard lots of people say this, like, oh, why isn't this more readily known? It's like, no, like there's people have known about this, maybe not framed the way that the principles are framed, but like these, because the principles are just a metaphor for the truth of what is, and other people have seen that truth and maybe described it differently, but it's been there since the beginning of time. And he shares this story about when he was at a conference in California, and this lady was making a disturbance in the crowd, and he went and talked to her afterwards, and she kind of recounted what had happened to her. But she said, I wanted to yell to the whole world, I'm free. I'm let out of prison. No longer am I going to be controlled by the treatment of some person. And it's like he talks about, this is a hard pill for people to swallow, but the very essence of being proactive is the realization that who you really are and how your experience is created. That's, he doesn't say it in those words, but to me, that's I've had this exact experience. I am free. Like I've uttered those words. I've had that feeling as I've gotten into the principles. So I can totally relate to what this lady was going through.
Yeah, there's a sense for me of time in the proactive versus reactive. Let's say, in the sense that, and again, I think from a clarity perspective, the word is, rather than proactive, would be creative, and reactive. Interesting how linguistically, like, they both have a preposition after them. So you're kind of reactive at something. So at the circumstance, at the event, at the thing, at the, what somebody said. It's not really reactive to, you're reactive at. But proactive would follow with a preposition or something like you're proactive towards something. Indicates, interestingly, a movement towards the unknown that hasn't actually been created yet. But reactive always remains in time, in a place that's actually already been, because of the circumstance and the event. It's already gone, it's already passed. There's also this time concept for me. And I can understand perhaps where there's misunderstanding in the word proactive, because sometimes if one needs to create or be something in the future, it kind of can get a little bit scary. So like there's something in this part where he speaks of proactivity, if you like, that could be misunderstood, misinterpreted through his words because of a personal feeling around the word proactive. That's just come up to me now. I mean, and it looks to me that his, I love his explanation around proactive. It makes perfect sense to me. But for sure, now that I have a clear understanding of where my experience comes from, so that now I know where my experience comes from, I don't have to be afraid of it. So again, sometimes I found that for the reading of this book, it was extraordinarily useful to me to have, the principles behind clarity very clear in my mind.
What comes up for me as you're speaking there, Elaine, is proactivity, in this case to me, speaks of choice. And what I highlighted time and again through this part and thinking about the principles behind clarity, and when we are with people or when we're trying to figure something out for ourselves and we feel like a bit scared or a bit I can't or a bit all the other reasons things might not work out, this whole notion of resourcefulness and initiative and going back to the we have it, we have what we're looking for. And the fact that we have it might not make everything clear, but it means that ultimately there is an answer to whatever we're trying to figure out. Therefore, it probably isn't that scary. What scares us is forgetting that.
Yeah. It's funny, this time through when I read about the R&I, Resourcefulness Initiative, it had me think about all the things that Jamie talks about in terms of our innate capacities for insights, realization, our innate capacity for well-being. Like, that's your resourcefulness and initiative is wrapped up in all those things, or another set of words to describe those things. So, yeah. And it's funny, Elaine, that you mentioned the language part, because he does a whole thing in here about the comparison of reactive language versus proactive language. And it's kind of like victim versus creator. I see it too as like outside in versus inside out.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The interesting thing for me is even when we think we're outside in, or acting as if it were outside in, it's still an inside out thing. Like we're still creating that experience through the power of thought. It's just a misunderstanding of what's going on.
Yeah.
I highlighted this when it says a serious problem with the reactive language is that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. People become reinforced in the paradigm that they are determined, and they produce evidence to support the belief. And I don't know if it's in here, but the words kind of ring in my ears from listening to these CDs so many times is argue for your weaknesses and they're yours. Was a Covey quote. And, and we know this from working with clients, right? Like, every client I've ever had, they have a mountain of evidence that they bring with them as to why they are the way they are. And me too. I mean, the things that I cope with and deal with personally, I have a mountain of evidence. So this whole somehow realizing that it's this self-fulfilling prophecy element of it helps me to kind of see through all that.
Yeah.
And interestingly, he on that paragraph that you're on, Greg, a serious problem with reactive language, his final sentence there is basically, I mean, it's totally outside, and they blame outside forces for people's circumstances, even the stars for their own situation. And how often how attuned are we to hear people say, I can't, or it won't, or they something, or, just to pick up on that. And the more we hear that, and the more we hear it in ourselves, just to actually catch ourselves out with that, it's those moments in themselves are aha moments. Oh, there that goes again. It's like the just reeling out of the story.
Another thing I saw quite differently is he tells this story about this man and his wife, and the love isn't there, and stuff. And he says, proactive people make love a verb. Love is something you do, the sacrifice you make, the giving of self, like a mother bringing a newborn into the world. But this whole realm of love, I had a realization when I was kind of dissecting Jamie's one-to-one unpack stuff. In the day 2 of that thing, he has an AI generated transcript of the whole 6 hours. And the word love, he said love like 93 times or something. And it really stood out to me. And I realized, I had thinking around the word love. Like I had, I wouldn't be comfortable until I saw through it a couple of weeks ago when somebody was, sharing something, say, oh, I love that. Like, it seemed over the top to me. And I know in Principles and with Sid Banks, everything comes down to love and understanding. Like this whole realm of the word love and the concept of love, I see it much differently now than I did even like 3 weeks ago.
Mm.
So when I was reading this thing about this husband and wife and the love and kind of where Covey was pointing them to, I thought, oh yeah, that's, I don't know, new and fresh for me.
Yeah. I suppose it's extraordinarily difficult to explain something that actually doesn't, being formless,
Mm.
a principle, doesn't actually have a word attached to it. And then I'm kind of thinking that in the human experience, perhaps as language has developed, the nearest thing that could perhaps get close, as sort of close to the sense of love is perhaps at the moment of procreation between man and woman.
Mm.
So perhaps in time, that word was the best thing they could do given the circumstances, if you like. But the idea is that we don't have a word, just either. Could it be you, me, Lynn, Jamie, Stephen, Covey, Sid Banks, whoever? It's just a word.
Mm.
And it's still outside. It's not inside.
Mm.
If you see what I mean. So it's a really difficult philosophical concept sometimes to get a grip on.
Mm.
Among human beings having a human experience, until of course you have got a grip on it. In the moment that I'm just kind of thinking, the only thing I can think that what love really looks like is that moment when life is about to be generated through procreation. But of course, evolution, times, wars, governments, God knows what else, politics, geography, and all the rest of it have, dramatically changed the very sense of the word love. And just even, I can imagine the three of us have got very different thoughts about that word, really. And that we're only three amongst 8 billion people, So. But
what I was just thinking was,
we're not talking about that love.
Mm-mm.
See what I mean? Yeah.
Mm. And I mean, basically, that's all thought too.
Exactly.
I mean, who says what? It's all thought. Who says what love is? So some time way back, someone slapped a word on something. Whoever knows when that happened, and then who determines what that is and how it plays out. But that's all thought too. And this whole the conversation, the guy at the seminar, it's a fabulous example of it's all thought, because he's saying, oh, the love isn't there, it's not there, it's like, like it's a thing, like it's it's like he's looking for this thing,
which it isn't.
It's made up.
And again, there's nothing after the word love, if we're going to keep the word for the sake of being able to communicate. So you actually cannot love in this concept. You can't love something or somebody, because the concept of love ends at the end of at the E after love. Full stop. It's one of those, it just is. But it doesn't do anything or be anything even. It just is.
This could be a whole hour in itself.
I know it. I know. You know what I mean?
No, it actually really could. When I read this, we're getting a bit off script, but when I read this little section here, and it's not the first time that this has ever struck me since I've been in this space, I often think, so many divorces could be avoided.
Mm.
I mean, really, they could just be avoided if only. So many lots of things could be avoided. I know we've talked about this in our last thing. We've mentioned wars and stuff, Elaine, but
Yeah.
it's all thought.
Yeah. Well,
Are we
speaking of
wrapping
thought,
up?
when the next model he kind of introduces is the circle of concern and circle of influence, and kind of describing distinctions between what that looks like for proactive people versus reactive. And it occurred to me this time through too, it's like he's talking about the content of their thought, right? Like that's, a proactive person, the content of their thought is kind of going in the direction outwards from the center of the circle, their circle of influence expanding, whereas the reactive person, the content of their thought is the circle of concern around them kind of collapsing in on them and holding them down or shrinking them. So yeah, it was, again, looking at this through a principles lens, or a lens of the power of thought. It's been totally different for me. And the way I relate to this model. I mean, I've spent years teaching this model to people, my staff and different people in different courses I've done, and to now see it differently, and how the whole model can just kind of explode when you understand the nature of thought. Because before I would have looked at it from a content of thought perspective, and now understanding the principles behind clarity, realizing the way to master this model, or to not even need the model, is to understand the nature of thought, so that whether you're having proactive thoughts or reactive thoughts, whatever, it's just thought. Kind of like you just said, it's all thought.
Yeah.
We've got about 3 minutes left. If there's anything specific you guys want to touch on.
I've got nothing more to add there. For me, the two of you summed the whole thing up nicely, I think. I'm just sifting through.
I think probably one of the last things I had was on page 96, the have and the bees, and that there was so much screaming of toxic goals there. I'll be happy when.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the very first one, he says, I'll be happy when I have my house paid off.
Yeah. And then they go on.
So yeah, and another thing that's aligned with the book Clarity in terms of things it's referring to. I highlighted this, which is I say one of my favorite quotes, of which I have many, but any time we think the problem is out there, that thought is the problem. And again, I used to think about that from just an outside in versus inside out perspective. Like, oh, okay, I need to focus within. I can't look at that as being a problem that has to solve before I can do anything about it. What can I proactively do about it? And then since coming to the principles, it's been like, oh, thought. Like it's about thought. It's not about the perception of a problem, or whether I'm going to solve it or somebody else needs to solve it. The point here is that very thought is the problem. Yeah. It's all about thought, understanding the nature of thought.
Yeah.
Sums it up.
And I highlighted this one too, because you'll probably understand it when I read it. Sometimes the most proactive thing we can do is to be happy, just to genuinely smile. I thought that, in the world of advice, that's some pretty good advice right there.
Well, yeah. Just the smile, despite everything.
Yeah. Well, I think, when I've had the realization, whenever I've been caught in a thought storm that is just thought, the most natural thing for me to do is to smile and kind of laugh about it.
Yeah, I when I'm in my thought storms, and then I realize what's going on, my kind of go-to place is just I sort of go, and apparently, like horses, apparently when horses sigh, it means that they've learned something.
Mm.
And I notice I'm just looking over myself doing that. You know, you guys know I have my little clarity corner. When I'm not quite sure what to do with myself, I just kind of go into my balcony and look out over into the yard and like do nothing. And then I realize I often come back in with a fresh new idea. You know, like sort of,
Mm.
But it's not because of what I've been thinking. It's because I've left behind what I've been thinking and stepped into something that I have no idea what it will be, but it's something. And and that is so relieving. It's instant happiness sort of thing. Sometimes momentary, sometimes more, but it's instant. And it's the very knowing, you know, that it whatever it is, you know, the criminal is my thought.
Mm.
The stuff that's rattling through my head every time. Yeah.
Last thing I wanted to mention was the in the end, when Sean Covey gives his kind of the new look at these chapters, and he tells a story about how, like, you know, he'd come home and he'd be complaining about his day or whatever. And of course, as you would expect, Stephen Covey, his dad, was like, "That's very reactive, you know. You should,
don't be a victim."
He says, "I'd go find mom, who would let me blame other people for my problems. It was a good balance. Dad was always loyal to the principles, while mom was always loyal to you." And I could just imagine growing up in that household.
Yeah.
And then the last thing he said, I highlighted here, was, "We are the creative forces of our lives, and we are free to choose, but we have to be reminded of this all the time." And it kind of reminded me of the, you know, the human experience, that even when you're aware of the principles and you have deep grounding, we get swept away by the world of thought and have to be reminded constantly about how our experience created and who we really are, and we can fall out of it and then get swept away again and then fall out and swept away. And that's life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That and just what you're saying, Greg, just reminds me. I think it's some guy called Zig Ziglar, who says something like personal development is a bit like personal hygiene. You know, like you do it every day.
Yeah.
You know, because if you don't, you've got a problem.
Yeah.
The thing. So the idea that, you know, you do need to remember and get up and do it again and remind yourself and keep on. That's growth.
Yeah.
That is growth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Habit 2 next time.
Yeah.
Great.
Forward.
This has been fun. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ken.